Hi friends, Dr. Anastasia, previously known as Dr. Sunshine, is here and I'm very happy to see you. Today I wanted to come to you with some very quick specific tips about dealing with anxious rumination. I know most of the time on this channel I have been talking about depression, so today I will mention a little bit about anxious rumination and give you some very useful strategies that you can implement right away. Rumination, we've talked about it before. Basically what it is when we go over and over in our head and it feels like we're solving a problem, and in reality we're not. We're just going over the same loop and kind of like chewing and regurgitating the same thoughts, and usually each round they get more and more catastrophic and make us feel more and more anxious. So what do we do when this happens? So here's a few scenarios. Number one, let's say you have a real problem. Let's say you're worried about an upcoming exam and you're worried and it's really consuming you. So to stop this rumination, you have to commit to a specific time to sit down and write a plan. Brainstorm with some ideas and write down a problem-solving plan that will address this particular anxiety. Now, it's very important that you pick one specific problem and that you pick the right issue. So for instance, maybe your worry is that you're not gonna know the answers to the questions on the exam. In that case, your problem-solving plan may be to hire a tutor, okay? However, maybe the issue is not that you're afraid you're not gonna answer the test, but you're just worried about making it to class and exam in the first place because there will be other people there, so, which is more of a social anxiety issue. So in that case, the issue will be somewhat different. Specific issue, one at a time, make sure it's the right issue. You sit down, you brainstorm, you evaluate all of the available options, and then you create a plan. Now, it's very important that you set a date for re-evaluating the plan, or so to speak, to evaluating how effective the plan is. And it's equally as important that before that time, you do not go back to reformulating the plan. That's a no-no. So you have a specific date, and that's when you will be allowed to reevaluate how well your plan is addressing the issue. So that's when you have a real problem, and it's a solvable problem. And in this case, one thing you can do is, if you have breakthrough anxiety, which is, something, those thoughts about the exam come back during the day, even in between the times when you're working on that with the tutor and all of that stuff. It's very important, if you remember from one of my earlier videos, very important to actually actively disengage your mind from ruminative cycle. So break the cycle. And it doesn't matter what you gotta do, it has to be active, where your mind is actively involved. So what works for most people is to put on loud music, their favorite song that really elicits an emotional response, and then sing aloud. It's very important to sing aloud because that actually involves your brain and it engages your brain. That's a very important part, not just passively listening, because in that state it's very easy for your mind to go back to rumination again. Another thing you can do is to, when rumination comes back, is to sit down and write a list of gratitude or think about things that you are grateful for. That also helps for some people, because it's also an active strategy. So second situation is there may be a real issue, but there is no solution or no immediate solution. And it is something that's we are really worried about, and it's consuming us. Let's say a close one is dying, or they're diagnosed with cancer, but we don't know what type of cancer and how long they have to live. So that's a different type of situation. In this case, you can create a problem-solving plan, but it's not going to be as helpful. So what do we do in this case? First of all, we have to look at what are we exactly saying to ourselves. Most often you will catch yourself engaging in catastrophizing. Catastrophizing is the most common anxiety-inducing thought pattern. And basically what it is a way of thinking where you think of the worst case scenario and you think you underestimate your ability to cope with it in the rare case that it was to happen. So it's very important to ask yourself, is this scenario that I'm thinking about, is it the most likely thing that's gonna happen, or is there something that's more likely? And then you evaluate your resources and your ability to cope with it. In this case, you're probably underestimating your resources and your ability to cope with this situation. I can tell you, I do that all the time. Whenever something happens, my mind goes to the worst case scenario, and then it always ends up with me having to go back to Russia, not being able to find another job. But in reality, you can look at that thought and say, just rephrase it to a more realistic one, such as, it's gonna be really terrible and I'm gonna really hate it, but I can do it. I will be able to do it. There will be options. And you can even brainstorm what the options will be. If it's a loss of a job, you can look at where you can get another job. You can start applying to jobs and things like that. So this is decatastrophizing. It's very important. Every time you catch yourself doing it, stop and catch what you're saying to yourself, and then decatastrophize. So again, evaluate whether you are considering a likely scenario or the worst case scenario, and look at your resources and your ability to cope with it. And also in this situation, another thing that works, and this may sound counterintuitive, but it's called scheduling worry time. So I know it sounds kind of far-fetched, but it really works. So basically what it is, it means that in this situation that you're really consumed by and that doesn't have an immediate solution, you say to yourself, okay, there is not much I can do about it, but worrying about it only makes it worse. Definitely doesn't help me because I'm not, that's the key. For people who are anxious and for people who are engaged in anxious rumination, or this going over and over the issue, like what if, thing is, the reason we keep doing it is because it feels like we're solving a problem. It feels like we are actually doing something productive, like we're preparing ourselves for the worst case scenario. So I can tell you right away, this is not true. This type of thinking does not help us in real life situations, even though our mind convinces us of that. So I can tell you there were studies done where people who were engaged in this what if type of thinking and who were super highly vigilant, scanning their environment for potential danger because they believed that if they did that, they would be better off prepared to defend themselves and their loved ones. Well, guess what? Turns out that that's not the case, because a study compared people in the same situation and they checked for their level of vigilance or hypervigilance, or their level of rumination on the danger cues. And the study discovered that people who actually focused on internal danger cues were more likely than those who were not doing that. They were more likely to miss real situational danger cues and were more likely to actually allow something to happen to them, as compared to people who were not ruminating and not engaging in this type of repetitive thinking and hypervigilance. So anyway, about going back to the worry time, first of all, it's very, very important to tell yourself that I'm not gonna worry about it right now. It's not helpful. I need to focus on my work, getting my work done. But at 4 o'clock, let's say, when I get home at such and such time in such and such place, I will set aside 10 minutes. I will put on a timer and I will allow myself to worry for 10 minutes. Now, it's very important that you actually do go through with this, because otherwise your mind is not gonna take you seriously, and it will perceive that you're just trying to trick it. So very important that you actually set aside that time, and when that time comes, you create kind of a ritual that contains that anxiety in time and space. So it's a specific time frame. There is a timer for, let's say, 10 minutes. And each time you have to do it the same exact way. So meaning you have to be in the same room with the same lighting if possible, almost making it kind of like a ritual that really helps our minds to kind of contain that worry within that specific time and space. So the funniest part, and you probably already guessed it, most of my patients come back and they say, Dr. Anastasia, It really worked, but is it possible to stop it before the timer is up? Because I kind of ran out of things to worry about. So that, believe it or not, well, actually, if you have been listening to my talks, you already know the reason behind this. Our minds usually do what we don't want them to do, and on the opposite, they don't do what we want them to do. And that's why I highly advocate radical acceptance approach. Basically letting anything that comes up happen, run its course, and then let the next emotion take its place. So going back to that same rule, whatever we resist persists. So in this case, this anxiety, as you can see from this example, when you are trying not to do it, that's all you're doing. That's all your mind can think about. However, when you allow yourself that time and space to worry, you are maybe gonna worry for a little bit, but then your mind's gonna just go on to other things, just like with everything else. Nothing is permanent, and the law of impermanence is the only known thing in psychology. No emotion is final, no thought is final if we don't resist it or otherwise try to disengage from it willfully. So hopefully this was helpful. These couple of little tricks, please let me know if you have already tried those and if they worked for you, or if you can see yourself using them. Maybe you can use them and write in the comments about how effective it was for you. But I really would love to hear your opinion and what you thought of this talk. I can't wait to come back with more tips and tricks to handle anxiety, depression, and other conditions that you can request me to talk about. I love you, friends. Bye.